Good morning. We are Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, Mika Shem Elokeinu, Amagbi L'Sheves, close to the bottom of page 407. And those that may wonder why we're learning this Maimer, it's because it's the foundational, the source text of Hemshech Hayim Beis, the end of Hemshech Hayim Beis, which itself is based on the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe in Torah Ohr that we learned, the Chanukah Maimer, on this topic. And it's all part of understanding Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, Ner Mitzvah, and Torah Ohr. And we're up to right now the Torah Ohr part. What is Torah Ohr exactly? That's what we're learning right now. Yeah. So the class is dedicated in loving memory and honor of let me look up the name. Ariel ben Avram Roni Zal Zachenu Levrocha Hashem Yimkam Damei. So in his chus we're learning Chassidus, and hopefully we'll bring his family and him and his neshama comfort till we're zeicha and merit to the geula and the return of all the neshamas, especially those that were taken on Kiddush Hashem. Okay. So we're learning about Torah Ohr. So in one line, Torah Ohr is an illuminating force. There's a koyach hamagala. That's why it's called Torah Ohr. And the Mittler Rebbe is elaborating in detail, in very intricate detail, what this Ohr consists of. But essentially, we can call it an illuminating force. And what is it illuminating? It's illuminating for us what God is, what God wants, God's purpose. That's what Torah does. We discussed Torah Ohr, it illuminates. And especially in a world of darkness, like our world, where we don't have direction or guidance on our own, so the Torah serves as a critical guidebook, if you wish, or illuminating light, like a lighthouse in the dark sea that illuminates all the paths of life, as well as I said, illuminating what is God himself. As we're going to learn later, and we've already begun to understand, in contrast to the Torah Ohr, we're going to have Ner Mitzvah. Ner Mitzvah is a candle. We don't call it necessarily a revealer. A mitzvah manifests God's will in this world and transforms the physical world. But as far as an illuminator goes, what's the illuminating force that God gave us that is the most revealing of all? Like he said, the revealing of all secrets, of all Helam, and defies and negates any form of cheshach and Helam but tzimtzum. That's Torah Ohr. And it's an Ohr that is undiluted and unaffected by the tzimtzum. It's reflecting the atzmis and primis Ohr exactly as it is before the tzimtzum, all the way to revealing the ayin amiti and the yesh amiti. And this is due to Torah being quintessential chachma, koyach ma, utter bittul, being that it has no substance of its own. It's not an identity of its own. It's not a wisdom of its own. It's not an entity of its own. All it is a reflection of God and God's will. So therefore, Torah is not subject to tzimtzum, and that's what also allows it that within it should be sheda, should manifest the pure and untarnished etzem, like he calls it, both the ayin amiti and yesh amiti, as I explained yesterday, which is higher than any form of yesh v'davar ma. That's why only Torah can do that, because like he says, the language a few different ein primis v'atzmis the ein sof sheda rak b'chinas ayin v'nikra kayach ma the chachma the Torah dafka. And later he says it in similar words. He says she'ein nit b'shum asoga machshava al kein ein sheda rak b'chinas ma be'etzem the chachmas ha-Torah. So in several different ways, he expresses that the only place that a true elokus, which is ayin amiti, yesh amiti, which is beyond any yesh hanivra, any type of substance and identity, the ultimate place where it will channel will be through Torah. And he says, Oy b'bchinas bittul dema ba'anova v'shiflus, or through the bittul, the humility and the selflessness and of shiflus nemichus ruach of an individual who doesn't feel himself as yesh, for the same reason. The more bittul you have, the more you're a channel for that which is higher, a higher reality. The more yesh you are, the more you're an expression of yourself. You're not going to be a transparent channel of something higher. Like Moshe, that was Onu Mekol Adam, and Chen Kol Oni, V'chein Oni V'shval Ruach, like he said. And furthermore, Chol HaKodev, whoever's closer to the source, Kamei Yeser B'bitl, the Ma B'tachlis. The closer he is to the source, the more bitl there is, and he gave Keser, Tzach, it's a very refined light, and it's the closest to Ein Sof, and yet Uchamhu, it's dark, it's black, in comparison, Kodam, in the presence of Ilas, Ilas, the cause of causes. Because the Aveda, that's Yira Bereishis, the reverence that you stand, when you stand, even as great as you may be, but you stand in the face of God, you have a Yira Bereishis, a certain shame of a feeling an insignificance in a positive way, standing in the presence of such greatness. All the lights get darkened before him. That's where we stopped. So all this is coming to explain what Torah is. This is the persona. This is what Torah is all about. So we're getting a picture of the role of Torah Ohr, what Torah is, and as we shall learn, and we've already in my summary that I did on Sunday, and I'll just mention it again because it's good for context purposes. If you compare Torah to mitzvah, we'll talk about ner mitzvah. That mitzvah is not a pure hamshacha mamay lamata. It's a combination of mamay lamata and mamat lamata because it's taking the physical world and expressing the divine will within it. Where Torah is a completely pure illumination of mamay lamata, hamshacha mamay lamata. But if you compare it to tefillah and the neshama's work from the bottom up, you really see the difference. Because the neshama, as we've learned, as it comes down below, like the eyes, cannot see on their own because it's a dark world. As much as the neshama is a chelik elikam mal mamish, a pure piece of the divine, it does not see clearly in this world. That's why it needs Torah. The neshama without Torah would not know what to do in this world. You could say there's avim esoteres, there's a hidden, dormant love, and the neshama is filled with resources. That's for sure. But to really activate them and trigger them and get them going, and most importantly, direction and guidance, you need Torah. As we learned at length in Ayim Beis about the eyes need a siyua. So it's very clear that the neshama comes down below. It is the agent of change, and the neshama ultimately is ner Hashem nishmas. It's a flame, but at the end of the day, it needs Torah to really illuminate it. So when you think of tefillah, even davening is from the bottom up, as we discussed. Davening is not from the top down. You're not getting an illuminate. It's not like God gave us a picture of himself through davening. Davening is our effort on our terms to reach God. The sulam, the ladder that we build from earth to heaven. But if you want a picture of God, says a picture of me, ata haresel ladas. You want to see a picture of me, what I look like, how I see things, and who I am, and how I see things, and what's the purpose of everything. That's Torah. So this is going to be a critical piece, as I believe that when we continue learning this and finish it, we'll see, going back to Ayim Beis, how the contrast to Torah, what begins on page 1350, what is Torah? How Torah is different than the Neshamas. That was one of the questions the Rebbe Rashab asked on page 1350. What is the difference between the Adam of Torah and the Adam of Neshamas? In addition to the question about what's the difference between Ner Mitzvah and Torah Ohr and Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. But all of these are interplay between many different factors. Torah, Mitzvahs, Neshama, Tefillah, that, as we discussed, are all part of the process of transforming this world into Adira B'Tachteinu. So what we're in the middle of right now is in what is Torah Ohr, and we're going to continue learning now about this bittul of Torah and how Torah manifests and reveals everything, even the deepest secrets, the deepest levels of concealment. I should also add that when we learned from Amata Lamaila, before page 1350, and he spoke even about Einoid, seeing the divine within the concealment, the Helam Ha'atzmi, that's the other side of the spectrum, the completely the other end of the spectrum than Torah. Torah Ohr is not Helam Ha'atzmi. Torah Ohr is a Gilui. It reveals all the Helamas. Like he said, even yesterday we learned, he used the word Helam Ha'atzmi, even though I don't know if he meant Helam Ha'atzmi, but he used the word when he said how Torah reveals everything. He said that Torah is the Megala. Just want to find that expression. Actually, he's going to say it afterwards. I don't think we read that line yet. But bottom line, he did say Torah is Megala, Helama, all the Helamas of the Mutzna or Mufla of the deepest levels. But Torah's role is to reveal. And so therefore, Torah is a revealer. When we talk about Ein Eid, when he spoke about from the distress, like the Baal Tshuva, from the darkness we come to experience godliness, that's the darkness is propelling us there. And that's Takamamata Lamaila. That's what he explained more, Tefillah and Tshuva and so on, which is more how the neshama coming down below what we discover within the darkness. But generally speaking, even the Mamat Lamaila he spoke of Havaya Hu Elikim, generally it's about seeing through the tzimtzum, that the whole tzimtzum is in order to bring light. Torah is initially an illuminating force. That's what Torah is. It's an illuminating force. It's a megala. That's the key thing to remember. And to make a dira b'tachtenim, you really need both. Because you want to have the gili of Elikus, but you want the gili of the Atzmus. In the Yesh HaNivra, you want to see the Yesh HaMiti. So you really want two things here. You want the Yesh of this world, which is the opposite of Torah. That comes through the Tzimtzum and through Kalim, and the Rishimu that goes all the way to the Helam Ha'atzmi. But you want the revelation of the divine. So it's really a combination of the eyes actually seeing the Etzem, but you want it to be seeing. You want the revelation. So you really need Gili of Torah, but the Etzem that comes through the Yesh itself. And that's what we're going to learn as well, how it ultimately comes together. And that's why it becomes one symbiotic harmony between all these factors that help us experience the highest levels of the divine, but in a revealed way, in a way that is integrated and internalized in our lives. Meaning it's revealed and also internalized. Okay. So with that, let us continue from the parentheses. So we're at 8 lines from the bottom of page 407. Pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. And let's continue here. Vizehu, he says now, this level that we're talking about, Zehu b'chinas das elyon. This is the level of das elyon. Das elyon, as we recall learning, both the Mitler Rebbe's Maimer and in Ayin Beis, is the perspective from above. Das Tachton is seeing the godliness through the lens of existence, where the Lamata is the Yesh, and the Ayin Eliki is the Yesh Ma'ayin. The Yesh is seeking its source, but it's a state of Ayin. It's a state of mystery beyond us. When you took Das Elyon, we said it's the other way around. The Yesh is Atzmus, Yesh Amiti, and the Ayin is the Ohr that Atzmus expresses itself. So there, it's Yesh to Ayin, be Yesh to Ayin, whereas in Das Tachten, it's Ba'ayin to Yesh, or the Yesh from the Ayin. And it's all one process, obviously. Yesh, Ayin, Ayin, Yesh. So with that, he's now going back that it's Das Elyon. Now you may recall on top of page 405, he said in the parentheses that what says L'mayla b'inyan beis days the Das Elyon Yesh Ayin Zeu Ayin the Chachmei Lo Akduma de Torah Ohr. He already mentioned. He said Kamoshi is boy. So apparently this is where he's going to explain what he said. He may explain it later as well. So in other words, Torah, if you think about it, what is Torah Megala? We said it's Megala the Ayin Amiti. The Ayin Amiti or the Yesh Amiti. So clearly Torah associates with Das Elyon, and Das Elyon, like he's saying here, is this highest level that is completely bottled to Elikus. So we're not talking about the Ayin of the Yesh HaNivra. We're not talking about the Elikus that is tailored and relates to existence. We're talking here now about the levels of the divine that are beyond existence, which are not subject to the Tzimtzum, as we discussed. So he says, Zeu b'chinas Das Elyon. Shezeu kamei de kamei mamish. The Das Elyon is exactly kamei mamish as it stands in God's presence, but in His presence. That's what Das Elyon is. Das Tachten is already removed from God's presence. What I mean, removed, it's not under the effect. It's like the student, not in the presence of his teacher, because the teacher is concealed. The Ohr of the teacher is concealed. So the student is a student of many, is a teacher himself of many students. But when the teacher, the student stands before the teacher, kamei, then it's a state of das elyon, the complete bit. The kol tzach, kamei mamish, the kol tzach. The tzach that he said before from Keser, that very refined light, tzach, standing in the presence, kodem ilus ha'ilus. Ulakach yoshas cheshach sisrei. So that's why it's in a state of yoshas cheshach sisrei, a state of darkness like ucham. So now is he saying it in a different way than he said before? Before he's used yoshas cheshach sisrei on the tzimtzum, that was the tzimtzum. God concealed his presence. Here he's using yoshas cheshach sisrei on the Ohr that is completely bottled telekus. That's in a state of cheshach like ucham. So I think he may be using it a little differently than he used it before. Not a little, very differently. Possible. I want to see how he continues. But he clearly is talking now about the level that's kamei mamish. Okay. And v'chein omer, and the same idea we also say by Moshe. Remember, Moshe received the Torah. It says, Moshe nigash el ha'arofel. Moshe approached the cloud. Dafke. What does the cloud represent? The cloud represents a concealment. Because a cloud conceals. He says that's the level dafke, el ha'arofel dafke, sheshem elikim. Of Shem Elikim, which is a Helam, which is a Choshech. Ki kvoid Elikim haster dover, the Helam acher Helam dafke, at shenikra stima de kol stimen.
Shesham Elokim?
What?
Shesham Elokim?
Oh, maybe not Sheshem. Let's see. Shom nigash dafke. Yeah, probably. More correct. Yeah. You're correct. Shesham Elikim. That there in the Arofel is Elikim, like it says, Kved Elikim hasta David. The glory of God is hasta conceals, like he brings from the pasuk. Yeah, Mishlei. The Helam achad Helam, a concealment after a concealment in addition over a concealment. Dafka atchanikre, to the point that it's called stima the chol stimen. Stima from the word sasum, like sasum the chol stumim, which means the covering of all coverings. So it's not just a concealment; it's a concealment with other concealment, meaning the deepest levels of concealment. So that's what the meaning is. And Moshe Nigash, he approached the cloud. So this is all why, because as he said, the closer you get to the source, the more you get darkened. Like the tzach, like tzach, you get completely bottled. Bottle here, dark, doesn't mean dark, the opposite of light, as in dark, which is a negative. It means dark that you have no substance of your own. You have no light of your own. Like the candle in the light of the sun. There's no light. The light disappears and actually becomes completely like darkened in the face of such powerful light. So it's really an utter bittul. So just make that clear. Tzimtzum that he spoke about, the koyachat tzimtzum is the Eibishter conceals elikus, like the teacher concealing his ideas. That's a different tzimtzum. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about tzimtzum now. We're talking about being close to the source. You lose your entire sense of self and identity, or any form of gili. You lose yourself. A student is not going to speak in front of his master, and he's going to lose his own identity, lost as in completely bottled and nullified in that presence. That's what he means here. So Moshe, as he approached these higher levels, these higher states, this is what he experienced. I want to see one thing, 1 second. Etzach, on the hidden. They refer earlier to a page. Just want to see if there's something there that can help us. 1 second. Interesting. Earlier in this volume, the Mittler Rebbe's Maimorim, page 36 and 37, I'm not going to go over it, but he explains there why Keser is called Yira Bereishis, this reverence of shame, and why its bitl is higher than the bitl of Chachma. An interesting piece that could help us understand this, but I'd rather leave that for now. I'd rather continue learning here, but maybe I'll look at it a little more later. Yeah, he brings where, thing what I always talk about, absorbing, that when you're busy absorbing, you can't be exuding. That's the idea, that the closer you are, when you're like by Chazara, when we listen to the Rebbe, you can't be processing your own ideas. You have to lose yourself. You have to lose your ideas and your preconceived notions and everything you're thinking about, because all you're now in a state of absorbing that which is higher than you. That's what he brings there about Keser, about this level that we're discussing here. So it's a level of complete bittul where you're losing your own identity, your own gilui, so to speak. The gilui is being completely covered up as you go into the kved elikim hasta davar helam achelam achnikus timed dechos timen. Okay, any questions before I continue? And there's still the beginning of the parentheses here, which I see is going to go, may even go to the end of the paragraph. Possible. Not sure. No, I don't know. I'm not sure where it ends. Any questions?
I understood everything you explained, and the way you explained it makes sense to me. But at the same time, take a step back and realize that approaching the Eibishter, it's a gilui of Or, and the Or is overpowering. Just like why couldn't Moshe Rabbeinu see the face of Hashem? And so it's a little, I don't know. It seems contrasted. On the one hand, there's too much gilui of Elokus. On the other hand, you're darkened in the face of this source. I mean, maybe we're describing the same thing from different perspectives. I don't know.
I'm not even sure. Let's talk about the example. A student who's become a great teacher, he's teaching his students, and then he goes back to his master, to his Rebbe. In front of his Rebbe, he's not speaking. He completely loses his whole identity, his whole sense of self, precisely because he's in the presence of such greatness. When he's removed from there, he goes back to his place. There is a big gadol. So how would you explain, where do you see a contradiction in this?
Well, maybe not. That's what I said. Maybe there's a gilui relative to the person, but the person himself is darkened, if you will.
I mean, are we talking semantics, the word gilui, or are we talking about what's happening? What he's saying is that the closer you get to the source, like the candle in the light of the sun. That's all he's saying here.
Yeah, okay. I think it's the same thing.
Okay. Yeah. My question I still am wondering about why he's bringing this here. How is this helping us understand the idea? I mean, I explained it yesterday because Torah is so bottle, that's why it can channel the highest levels of Elokus because of its bittul. So perhaps he's bringing this to explain that the closer it gets, the more bottle it is. But Torah, I was trying to understand because seemingly Torah is bottle on its own. It doesn't have to get closer. That's what it is. Torah by Ebe Etzem is this level. But nevertheless, it's bringing it. We'll see. Maybe it's part of the Aveda that if you want to bring the Anova to be humble, like he's saying, that means the closer you get to the source, the more bittul you have. And that is what channels the highest levels of the divine. That's most likely what he's saying. But regardless, that is what he's addressing here.
And the other question...
Just was looking...
okay.
Excuse me, what do you want to say?
I had another question. Just this, what you just said, that this is Bechinas Bittul, Be'anava, V'shiflus, V'nemuchus Ruach. So up to the point that he doesn't feel himself. Okay, fine. I like the idea of Bittul, obviously, makes sense. But at the same time, this suggests that like the person that really is in, let's just call Yira Bushis, is pretty lowly of spirit, and yet we remember much earlier in Ayin Beis, and I know this isn't Ayin Beis, so it's fundamental Chassidus, we talked about the power of simcha and the importance of not letting your ruach fall low, because it could be the, whatever, all kinds of reasons.
As I said yesterday, this does not mean fall low as in depression or lowliness and low self-esteem. We're not talking about that. We're talking here about utter bittul that comes from strength. Moshe Rabbeinu was the most humble man, had nothing to do with lowliness. It had to do because he recognized that all his gifts came from above and that he was completely just a channel of something higher than himself. We're not talking about here lowliness as in low self-esteem at all. This, on the contrary, this is a much stronger state than someone that has a sense of self. This is a loss of self out of experiencing something greater than yourself, not because you feel like you're nobody.
Got it.
Yeah. So
thank you.
Yeah. So continuing on, let's continue. This is interesting, this next piece. This explains something very fundamental. V'zehu hateda hagdesha, and this is the meaning when we say that the Holy Torah nikra amen. Remember, v'eya etzle amen. That Torah was for him like a nurse, what they call nursling, I think they called it in the translation. Basically, God, it's like God is its protector. So God nurses it. God trains it. Amen. So based on the Medrash, she said earlier that Amen means it was mutzno mufla dafke. You look at the top of the page where he brought it. He said Amen mutzno mufla. Few places. In other words, the Torah, like I mentioned from the language of the Gemara, chem de gnuza. It was just God and Torah, and the Torah was like God alone with his child, so to speak, which is the Torah. I don't want to use the word child, that's not the exact translation, but it's his protege, if you wish. It's his entity. And it's a state of mutzna umufla on its own. On its own. Mufla. Then when Hashem gave the Torah, he gave us his most precious treasure. But initially, but that on its own is mutzna mufla. Mutzna is like from the word sinua, concealed. And mufla, beyond, meaning beyond us, beyond anything, dafka. Why? Lefisha ein sof. And now he brings another expression, again, classic Mittler Rebbe, that he said already this idea, but he now brings more points. Like that, like I said, free flow of consciousness. Lefisha ein sof lamaila aden ketz. Because ein sof, which we're talking about, that Torah and ein sof, we said, was synonymous here to some extent. Not completely, but somewhat. So Ein Sof is L'mayla Aden Ketz. What means L'mayla Aden Ketz? Be Ilui Acher Ili. That's the acronym. Ilui Acher Ili, higher, like Ilui, elevated after elevation. Ilui Acher Ili, Behelam Atzmusei, in the Helam within the Etzem. Atzmusei, like concealed within him, deeper and deeper. When you say, for example, that every one of us carries our innermost secrets. So you go deeper and deeper. Behelam Atzmusei means as you go deeper into the person, deeper into the etzem, there's more and more there. Behelam Atzmusei, bli shir, without limit. That means l'mayla aden ketz, ein ketz. Now, some of you may be familiar with this expression from Tikkun Zeyar, and it is cited and explained in Basaligani, Yud Shvat, when we learned this year, chapter 14, and the previous chapters, he talks about Ein Sof is lamata mata aden tachlis. He says gili yacha gili, that the air comes down all the way to the lowest levels. That's in Revelation. And then there's lamayla aden ketz helam acha helam, that the secrets, the hidden treasures, so to speak, that he calls it there, the hidden treasures, goes deeper and deeper within. In other words, for example, if a person is teaching and mashpia, so they say it could be mashpia to every type of student, like Moshe Shlomo Melech. He was able to give 3,000 examples to every type of student. But then you go the other direction. How deep are your inner secrets? How deep is your intimacy? Let's call it that. How deep is the intimacy of God himself? So that's where the Tikkun Zeyar says that Ein Sof is also l'mayla aden ketz. Just as it can express itself endlessly, it also goes deeper and deeper in its mystery and its mystique, higher and higher, aden shir, as he says here, bli shir. That is the level that he says, Teda Gadesha. That means the Eya Etzle Amen, that the Teda for him was this Amen Mutzna Umufla. That's the state what Teda, that's what Teda originates from. So that is the level. So we're talking here the level that it's Kamei. That's why it's completely bottled there. What he said before, that Moshe, when he approached the cloud, this is what he was experiencing. This Helam Achad Helam. Helam Achad Helam Dafkat Shenikla Stimid the Kol Stimid. But now comes the other side. The Teda didn't remain there. The Teda then was revealed. And that's what he's going to continue now. That's the Chiddush here. That the Teda that comes from such an intimate, hidden place, now, Omnam. And however, B'zeis Yisr Ma'alaser the Chachma the Teda. And this indeed is exactly the quality, the virtue, the power of the light of Chachma of Torah, Kosav, Kadma. Like he said before, by Yemer Elikim, after the Zachoshech, he said that all the concealment, then comes Yehi by Yehi, and he said that's Kadma. This was the top of page. Where was this? On top of page Kadma was a few pages back. Let me find it. I think it was page 403. It's definitely 403, but maybe even earlier. Let me see. No,
I only
sorry.
see it on 405.
Yeah, it's correct. It's not 403. 403 was still talking. Just one second.
The third line of the new paragraph on 405, the Hagam.
Yeah.
The Torah Ohr Nikra Ohr Kadma. Shnikra Chachma Hakduma LaOlam Hanaitzel.
Yeah. On top of page 405, correct. At the beginning of the paragraph. I just wanted to see the context. Okay. So he brought there from the Zohar that Torah is called the Kadma. Then at the bottom of the page, he spoke about it again. A few times he's spoken about this, Kadma. So the Kadma indicates that it's a primordial Ohr. It's not just Ohr. That even the Ohr, like he said, the Ohr Chanira Ohr, that even the Ohr of Torah as it comes down into Ishtalshalis is Ba'Ohr Cha, is all originates in Ohr Kadma, in that primordial Ohr. So that's what he's saying here now, that this is the mile of Ohr the Chachma, the Torah, Ohr Kadma canal, the Atzmus Erein Sof Mamish. So it's the primordial Ohr of Atzmus Erein Sof Mamish, Kamoishu Behelam Achehelam, meaning the Ohr as it is, not on lower levels, all the way in this highest, most intimate levels. Helam achar helam, the ein shir, and this is the chiddush. But that level, the atzmus. So again, the chacham, which is referring to kadma, the atzmus ein sof mamish commercial behelam achar helam, the ein shir. But that very level, that is those intimate, hidden levels, bali de gilui, has come now to be revealed. The sheda, and it dwells. Exactly as it is, undiluted, unchanged, as it is in its most intimate place, it now revealed in the Eir T'Teira that's revealed to us. And we've had that expression several times, Aniglis Lanu. In other words, if the Teira had remained there, and that's the Teira as it is within God's inner palace, in his inner sanctum. But then the Eibishter says he's going to give this Torah to us. And not to the angels who said, give it to us, because the angels felt they're in loftier and more sublime state, and they'd be much more appreciative of the Torah. No, the Eibishter gave Niglis Lanu. and the Torah that's given to us is exactly that Torah as it was, as it retains that power as it is above, as we've been learning throughout. So you see here that the Torah essentially combines the utter concealment of the deepest intimate levels, and that all is being revealed. It's revealing basically the most concealed levels, is what he's saying here. So there's a few themes, there are a few points going on here simultaneously. One is that the Torah is this revealer of the deepest secret levels. Second, that the Torah is bottle. That's why it can do so, because it doesn't have any substance of its own. And point number three, which we just learned, is that the closer you are to the source, the more bottle you are. So at different points, they all connected, obviously. But as I said, this last point didn't really explain how it's relevant to Torah, except by saying that Torah is the closest there is. So the Torah itself is the state of complete concealment in the face of God. That's the point. It's in a state of complete helam, because it doesn't have any mitzias of its own. And that very state is what's given to us in our Torah. So when we're learning Torah right now, and we're reading these verses here, or we're going to speak now about halacha, dal damash halacha, we're actually learning not just the revealed wisdom of God. We're learning the deepest secrets of God, but it's being revealed to us. Now the question is how much we understand and can reveal. That's already each person according to their level. But the Torah that we have is the very same Torah that is coming from that deepest place. So God gave us his most intimate levels of revelation of himself and everything he wants. That's the Torah that's revealed to us. That's essentially what he's saying here. So therefore, when you say Tzach, maybe this is the Chiddush here. When you speak about Tzach of Keser, you're saying, since it's so close, when Kamei Kodem Ilus HaIlus, when it's standing in the presence of the king, or the source of all sources, Ilus HaIlus, the cause of all causes, and it's standing like the student in front of the teacher, his master, so obviously he's completely silent and completely bottled. The question is, can that bittul be carried back to where when that Torah is now carried into this world? That's the key here, Kiddush. That same very bittul that is completely bottled as it stands before Hashem, the Torah is the same Torah that's given to us, that when we're learning an inyan and Torah, we have embedded in Torah that deep level of bittul. So it allows us to experience a Raisa v'Kudsha Bricha Kul Echad, the etzem of godliness, the ayin amiti, the yesh amiti. That may be what he's really coming to say now that I think about it. So it's not just talking about how bittul Torah is, but how it's carried over, even as Torah is given and revealed to us, is all part of this. Now, you could say, if you were going back to the last 3-4 pages, as I said, if you were to organize it logically, it would seem like a lot of pieces could be consolidated and structured a little differently. But as I said, the Mittler Rebbe wrote, like the Tzemach Tzedek said about him, that if you cut my father-in-law, blood wouldn't come from his veins, it would be chassidus. That's the way he learned and understood and taught chassidus, was like a flow. It was like a mayan amizgaber, literally an overwhelming and overflowing spring of water that just was relentless. People who spoke about when they heard the Mittler Rebbe say a maimer, it was like that. They just felt like literally like being completely submerged in wave after wave of chassidus. So you feel it in a sense when you read this. You see that it's like that. He speaks about an idea, and you think he may move on, and then he continues the idea and adds more and more. I'm just saying it because every time I read it, it throws me in a way. Because I say to myself, 1 second, this point was made earlier, and now he's adding something else. But that's experience. That's the Mittler Rebbe's unique way of teaching, which has its own interesting qualities. Okay, so this is what's happening now when the Torah Haniglas Lanu Kamei Dalet Amis Shel Halacha. So there's an expression that after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, it says Ein Lanu Ela Dalet Amis Shel Halacha. We have the 4 cubits of halacha, meaning halacha becomes the place where Hashem rests among us. So he's using that expression, Dalet Amis Shel Halacha. So within that Dalet Amis Shel Halacha, when we learn halacha, and halacha here means not just pure law, it means Torah, the Torah, halacha of Torah. So this Eir, what he's calling L'mayla Adein Ketz, Helam Acherem, the Ein Shir, is revealed there. Shenitves behem mamish. that this Eid Ein Sof, that's completely beyond, and is a state of Helam Achar Helam, is nitfus in these Dalet Amashal Locha. When we are those 4 cubits, when we're learning Torah, within it we contain and we grasp those highest levels of less machshava tfisa beklal, a Torah that's completely defies machshava and thought. That itself is being channeled into us. Ukamoshi is boy, as shall be explained. So you see here that Mitler Rebbe is still, how many Ukamoshi is boys have we had so far? I count at least 3 or 4, and they all are in the same topic. So clearly you see that he's continuing to add more points as he elaborates and develops the idea of Torah Ohr. All this is Torah Ohr. Before we continue, let me stop for any questions. Okay. V'hainu, continuing the next page, 408. V'hainu, and this means mitam aleph. V'hainu mitam aleph. What I think he means mitam aleph is for the reason stated above. For that first reason, even though he didn't give a tam beis, but I think with tam aleph, for the reason stated, he means that the first reason we discussed earlier, which is that what? And he says, Avuhu. So if you remember on the top of the page, when he said, why does Torah indeed, how does Torah indeed able to achieve such a paradox? That on one hand, it's revealing the deepest things that are fundamentally beyond revelation. So he said earlier, if you remember, he gave the reason on the 4th line, on top of page 407, he gave the reason. So I believe the Tam Aleph is referring to that reason, because it's saying the same words. Oh, and on the first line of the page, I should add, the root of the reason, the Tam for what? The reason that Torah is called Kava Midah, because it reveals all secrets. So he's referring to this Tam. And what is the reason? Top of page 408. Because the level of the wisdom of Torah is called koyach ma, like we learned. Ma bittel. Bebittel hayesh legamri. The utter nullification, the utter suspension of any form of yesh. Al kain. That's why, as we said earlier, and he said that literally on the top of the page, Al kain ein dover master. Said Mama is the same Asius here. Al kain ein b'chinas atzimtzum dechesh revehelim. The amkus, the amukes el yenim master amaylim klal uklal. And that's why, because Torah is chachma, as completely bottled, like we learned earlier. So besides the thing he explained afterwards, that bitl is a keli, or is allows to it channels the highest levels. The fact that it has no substance, so nothing can conceal it. There's no level of tzimtzum and darkness and concealment and cover of the highest levels of the depths above that are conceal and cover, that cover and conceal at all. But b'chinas er hachachma hazeh is the Torah er dafke. In this er of chachma that we're talking about, of Torah er dafke, there's nothing that conceals, because there's nothing concealed before him. The concealment is from the point of view of a recipient. But before by the Eibishter, there's no such thing as concealment. So if the Torah doesn't have any substance of its own, an identity of its own, therefore it's complete channel, it's a complete transparent channel of these deepest levels. Well, who? And he continues to explain, as I said, he said some of this already earlier, but the Mitler Rebbe style, he goes over some of the ideas more than once, especially if this was spoken and not written by him. It would make a lot of sense, because when he spoke, he may have felt the need to elaborate. But it's also possible the Mitler Rebbe wrote this, and what we're reading are not his own writing. We know that. It's Hatokis, those that copied it. But regardless, this is the style. But who? And this is Mishum de Kolshu B'chinas Ayin. This is literally what he said earlier on the previous page. There may be a little few more extra words, but let's read it. Because anything that's in a state of Ayin, substanceless, it has no substance and no identity. Hamushlil, umufshet, it negates and defies. Mufshet also means it's like stripped of. Mufshet, removed from. Beheder hargoshes yeshu mitzias dover ma legamri mekol v'kol. How many words he's using to explain this type of bittul? With a lack of any feeling of yesh, of self, umitzias, of substance, tover ma, of anything, any form of, there's not one inkling, one iota of any sense of self, legamri, completely, but bittul, mekol v'kol, and utterly. It's like basically absolutely and unequivocally bottle. So that any level that's like that, kolshu, a level that's in that state of ayin, bezed dafke, sheda, ma'era atzmus de ein sof, there dwells or rests from the air of atzmus de ein sof, shalafon of nigla kol helen v'gam cheshach sisrei leyachshich klal. Because before him, the source, everything is, all concealments are revealed. Nothing is concealed before him. And also cheshach sisrei, the darkness that we're talking about, lo yachshich is not darkened before him at all. Why? The kamech kachashech ke'era. Now he adds another expression which he did not use, at least in the last few pages, because for him darkness and light are one. So I think there's a few points that he's making here, not just one point. One is that since Torah has no substance, nothing can conceal it. Another thing is because once it's completely bottled, nothing is concealed before the Eibishter. So if you're there, everything is revealed to you. In other words, when the student is not in front of his master, his teacher, so then he could be a teacher and master of others. Great. But you can't say all the concealed things of his teacher are revealed to him. But when he's in the state of absorbing and he's completely bottled to his teacher, so paradoxically, that's when the deepest concealed elements of the teacher are revealed to him, because he's not on his own. All he is just the channel of the source. Which would be essentially when we were in a state of chazara, our job was just to express what the Rebbe was saying, not our own brilliance. So if I'll explain what I heard then, that's me explaining it on my terms. But if I'm able to convey exactly what was said, then I'm revealing even secrets that I myself may not be privy to, because I'm not speaking on my own. I'm just revealing and expressing that which what I heard from the master. Just to use that as an example. Let me just finish the topic. Let me finish the topic. Try to hold back your processing for a few minutes. 1 second. Okay, so darkness is just like light by him. Let me just see here what else he's going to say. If this is the end of a topic, I see another parenthesis. We still have a parenthesis that never concluded. Das Elyon. I think the parentheses may have to go stimma the chol stimma. That's yeah, probably after that. Okay, I think the parentheses on the previous page was only for 3 lines. Should go till after. There's a few places it can go, but it's probably right there. It's a short parentheses. Then there's this one, and now starts a new one. Just want to see the flow here before I stop for questions. 1 second. Another parentheses that doesn't have an end. Okay, I'll stop here for any question. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
So my question was just to clarify my understanding. Is he here basically trying to explain this seeming paradox, how something which is coming from such a high source that anything next to it is darkened in the face of it, nevertheless it becomes such a revelation in our hands. He's explaining here, how can that be? Is that fair to say what he's?
I wouldn't say nevertheless. I would say that's why. Because it has no substance of its own. That's why it channels these highest levels.
Yeah.
Like I just said, the student, when he has no identity of his own, then he's complete transparent channel of that which is higher than him. So when the Torah is given to us, we're getting something in its purest form, because it did not come through any
any Simpson or Helam. Yeah.
Any filters. Yeah. Okay.
How can it be that, let's say, Gomorrah, which is decised by humans? I think I talked about this previously.
And I explained, Torah, the Gemara is not humans. Torah b'pirusha nitna. Everything in the Gemara was given to Moshe by Hashem. Hashem explained to him the whole Torah Shabbat Peh that he passed on. We discussed this at length. And not only that, and Ayin Beis, he talks about it at length. When he talks about Torah Shabbat Peh in volume 3, there's a whole discussion on this.
And he's talking Mamish Gemara, not Mishnayos.
If there's Mishnah, Talmud, Mishnah, Mikra, all 3 levels.
I thought the oral law that was revealed to Moshe Rabbeinu.
Anyway, why don't you go back to the pages in Ayin Beis? I think I referred to last time you asked this. You know the pages? You want me to tell you the pages?
Please, I'm sorry.
Yeah. All Mikra, Mishnah, Talmud. Let's see here. Okay. Are there any other questions while I look this up?
I can text you after the class. I don't want to.
It's here at the bottom of page 1364 and on. Are there any other questions? Okay, if there are no other questions, let me just see here. I probably would stop it. Let me just see the Okay, I'm going to stop here because the next piece is going to need a little more explanation. So we'll stop before the parentheses on page 408. Yeah. I see afterwards he is going to explain the difference between Chachma of Torah and other wisdoms that I mentioned in the previous class. He's explicitly going to speak about it because it seems to jump out. Yeah.
That was the whole concept of Chabad, Chagas, and Nehi, right? I remember the Chabad was the Talmud, Chagas was the Mishnah, and then Nehi was the Mikra. And the fact was, it discussed that because Mikra is lower, that means it has its source at the highest level.
Correct.
Yeah.
And explain, Bria, Tzir, and Asiya is also Talmud, Mishnah, and Mikra. There's a long discussion there. What is Torah Sheba'al Peh and how Torah Sheba'al Peh really carries the air of Chachma from the highest levels. So it is connected somewhat here.
Good memory, George. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah. And I believe that he's actually going to talk about Torah Sheba'al and Torah Sheba'al Peh on page 410. He's going to talk about it somewhat. So it may all connect. Now, for the record, when you look it up in Ayin Beis, you're going to see there is a difference between Mikra, Mishnah, and Talmud. And there are different roles to the point where it is correct to say that Talmud, part of it, not Mishnah, is generated from the students who are trying to understand their teacher. So there is an element of Mamata Lamaila in the Mamata Lamata of Torah.
Right, that's my question.
Correct.
That's exactly my question.
Yeah, but that's not what he's talking about here. He's talking about Torah in general. And we'll talk about the different levels within Torah. That's why it's important to learn the Ayin Beis. Because in Ayin Beis, he addresses that as well. He talks about that. So we'll talk about that as well as we go further. We'll see how it goes here.
Okay.
But Torah in general is what we're talking about. Torah, which includes Torah Sheba'al Peh. And yes, and there is... he actually even speaks about Machshakim Hashivani, that Talmud Bavli comes from darkness. However, it is revealing God's will in darkness as well. because Torah is doing that as well. So I think, let me put it this way, if that's what you want to address, I would leave that later for a discussion of the breakdown of different dimensions of Torah, which is not what he's going into right now.
Understood.
That's Ayin Beis, and I think some of it will be discussed later in the Mittler Rebbe, and it is going to be relevant to the big picture of what Torah is. But I would wait till we finish what we're learning right now, because right now he's talking about Torah in its purest form, that God gave us the Torah, Matan Torah. Just keep that in mind, which includes Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh, Torah B'Pirusha Nitna, which includes Dal Ram Shalal Lochem. Yeah.
It's a more general discussion here. Not that it's not important, but it's just more general.
I would call it even more than general. I think it's critical to understanding Ayin Beis, but we're not yet ready to do that yet. We have to first finish this subject matter and see everything the Mittler Rebbe says. We're going to go back to Ayin Beis and discuss these levels of Torah in context of what I spoke before: Torah, Tefillah, mitzvahs, neshama. All those things will come together, all part of this discussion. The interface, as you'll see, each of these dimensions adds in the interface between the divine and existence. That's always the key to everything. The interface needs to have a representation of both parts of Elikus and the human or existence. That's where they all come together. And right now, Torah is representing above all, more than all the other levels, Elikus, as it comes down to us.
The giant flashlight.
Or the cosmic flashlight, if you wish. Or the cosmic lighthouse. Many different ways you could say it. Okay, so we're stopping here by the parentheses on page 408.